Hey everyone, welcome back to Carrots and Olives. My name is Brittany and today we are going to wrap up January with my currently inked for January fountain pens, and I am really excited to kind of give a update to the pens. I am really proud of myself for sticking with, let's just say, majority of the fountain pens, and let's just get into it. So I have my notebook. This is an Odyssey notebook. It's the one that has over 400 and has about 400 pages. They're numbered. And then I have my rickshaw fountain pen case. I have the Iroshizuku 3-pen case sitting in the front, and the rest of my pens inside. I have been looking at another rickshaw fountain pen case that is like the new number 4 type. I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but I've been thinking about getting that one just because I like the fact that the inside has all the nice fuzzy parts and it looks exactly like this shape. But let's get started. So I've kind of set up the page already for how I wanted to look at the pens overall. I started off earlier in the month to explain which pens I'm going to use for the month and then the corresponding inks. I put in the pen size, and then the ink, and then I did this off screen, but to show you how wet the inks were, I needed to add that, so I added it in later. And then in the middle of the month, I kind of wrote some notes down on how I was feeling about some of the pens. And within the first week, I already had some of my thoughts and I didn't want to lose them, so I wrote them down. I did add some pens. I just released a video on my most recent acquisition, and even though I've inked it up, I'm not including it for January because I haven't been using it on the regular. So rather than having 7 pens, I now have 9 for this month. But I still think it's pretty good considering how I used to use my pens in the past, or at least last year. I wrote them down so that we have an idea of what I've been using. Now for scoring, I've decided for this month, I'm trying something different. So this whole thing is rather new to me, even though I've been following others who do some type of grading or scoring system and have really been consistent with using a particular amount of pens throughout the month. So I've decided for my scoring system, and we'll see if this kind of sticks with me for the rest of the year or not, but I'm going to start off with grading each pen's flow, each pen's comfort, and then the ink. So I'm going to grade those, and then I'm going to pick which of the 9 I use would have been my top 3. It doesn't really take me that long to decide how I want to, or how I feel about a pen. I can usually tell pretty quickly. Like, I don't have to write a whole book. I don't have to fill pages and pages of a notebook to really decide if I really enjoy writing with this pen and ink combination. But I will share with you what I have done throughout the month so you can get an idea of how I've been using my fountain pens. So I'm zooming out a little bit so that you can see my notebooks. These are part of my 2023 journal notebook lineup, journal planner notebook lineup. And so I have my Superior Labor A5 notebook cover in undyed or in their nude color. And this has my take a note. And then I have the Moterm undyed, and this one has the R's planner. So as I go through each pen, I will show you little examples of where I was writing and using it throughout the month. So let's take a look at my pens. I wanted to keep it rather simple because I decided that I'm going to be using this case to not only travel with, but also to be like my main source of my pens that are going to be inked up while I'm traveling. So I managed to fit this Iroshizuku case in here. And in this case, I have 2 pens. I can put another pen in here. I think this is where I plan to put my newest Sailor in here since it is inked up. But I have my Platinum and Kaweco in here. And then in this part, whoa, I have the Rickshaw 6-pen case holder, and I have all my pens in here. Yeah, I have all 6 pens in here. And then I bought this one off of Amazon because I can fit this one in between the crevices of when I fold this together, and I could actually fold this within it so it holds like that. So I managed to put all these in this koozie, but the koozie doesn't have that nice soft fabric. So one of my pens kind of gets left out because I now have 9. But I do want to keep it down to 8 or 6 for majority of the months throughout the year. But anyway, we'll see how that goes. So let's get started. Not all these pens, like this one, I still have inked up because there's just so much beautiful ink in here. And this wasn't one of the pens I was writing with for this month, but because it is a Moonman, rather inexpensive, I didn't want to just waste the ink. So whenever I have time to use that pen, I just keep it off to the side, and I just kept it with all my inked pens. So I'm going to set this off to the side so we can get started. And I want to get started with the same pens that I use in this order. So let's start off with my Pilot Prera. And this is such a convenient pen because it's easy to quickly write and jot things down. And I'm actually using a new ink. I didn't make a note about it during my thoughts, but I was using this pen a lot in my hours planner. So I'm just going to write down the flow of this pen was okay. This ink is quite thick. It is a permanent ink or water resistant ink. And so I think with it being in a fine, coming out of a fine nib pen, made it not as like juicy as I prefer. So I would give it a 7. And you can see it's been sitting for a couple days. So I think I might need to make some adjustments to the ink itself. So I had to lubricate my nib with a water brush. And this is exactly what I'm talking about. The ink can get stuck because it's thick. So I'm giving it a 7. And I just don't think this is the best long term. So it's not the best long term for this pen. I'm not sure if it's the best for any pen, but definitely for this fine nib. It may be a different story if I was using this pen every single day consistently. It may not dry out. So this is probably the fifth day that I haven't used this pen in a row. So that is definitely going to cause this. As for comfort, this pen is very comfortable to me. So I'm giving it 10. I find this pen really comfortable and it's so easy to use. And then for the ink color is actually really pretty. It writes, I feel like it works really well on Tomoe River paper on 68 and 52. And so I'm going to give this ink an 8. The only reason I'm giving it an 8 is because it's a bit flat. It doesn't have depth to it. It's just plain and simple in the sense that there's nothing special going on with the ink outside of just the color itself. It's not shading or chromo shading. It's not glistening or shimmering or sheening. So it's pretty basic. But it works well in all of the notebooks I've used it in. So let me show you an example in the Hours Planner. So here's an example of how I was using this ink in the Hours Planner, and this is all using the same ink. I was able to draw with it because it has a fine nib, and in this paper, I'm not quite sure what this paper is. It's maybe Midori paper, or but it's not Tomoe River paper, and it does perform very well in this notebook. As you can tell, there's not much shading going on. It's pretty straightforward, and then also the ink almost seems a little bit not as dark as I had expected it to be, but it's still overall a pretty color. Okay, so our next pen is going to be the Leonardo Momento Magico, and that one is here. Oh no, I'm finding that as my pens sit in this case, somehow the caps are getting loose. Does anyone find that to be true while their pens are sitting in a koozie or in something like this 6-pen case? So this one I really enjoyed. This is using the Scribo Verde Mediterraneo, and this body is an emerald gold. I have it using a fine nib, but it is an Italian pen, so the pen itself, the nib itself is not as thin as a Eastern nib. So flow has been really nice. It's rather juicy, so I'm going to give it a 9. And actually, I'm going to get a 9.5. And then as for comfort, this is a 10. It's very comfortable. I actually prefer it without it being capped. And then for ink flow, for ink itself, the ink color is gorgeous. And this is the first time I've had my Scribo Verde Mediterraneo in a pen other than a Scribo pen. And it is it has the shading, which is something I really love. So I'm giving that a 10 as well. So for flow, I'm going to say very juicy. Very juicy, but not uncontrollable. So it's not just flowing like a gusher and just spreading everywhere. Comfort, This Leonardo pen is so comfortable and it's beautiful as well. It doesn't make me squeeze the barrel or the grip section too much, and it doesn't tire out my hands. Ink, it's gorgeous. With shading. I'll say beautiful shading. And it performs well on all the pages. So let me show you an example of how I was using it in my journal, which I've been using mainly for my children, talking about their day. So this is how I've been using it, and you could see the change in the color, and it's just gorgeous, and it was just so easy to write with. And yeah, it's just lovely. Okay, so the next pen we have is the Hardy Pen Writes, and I was using my Ferris Wheel Press Grape Ice Pop. It's in here, and I actually have a Franklin Christoph nib on this one. This is a medium cursive italic, and I've been using this one more recently within the past week. For flow, it's not very flowy, and actually I've had to kind of start it up after some time. You know, when you're writing and you kind of stop to think, and then you start back up again, and it's kind of like not as juicy as it was when you were writing in like consistently throughout your sentences. So I'm giving this a 7.5. It did better than this ink, but still it still needed some help. And you can see it's writing right away, whereas this one didn't write right away. And then for comfort, it's very comfortable. This barrel is very comfortable. The threads do not interfere, or they're really soft and they don't hurt. And plus the pen is lightweight. And so for comfort, I'm giving it a 9.5. The only thing I would say is that I feel like the grip section is just a little bit, it doesn't have any shape to it. So, I don't know. It feels a little basic, but it's still like a comfortable pen. Okay, so for the ink is actually on par. I do like this purple ink. I think it matches the pen barrel really well. I would just say it's pretty straightforward, and so I would give it a 8.5 because it's dark enough to read, but it's not, and it works well on all the papers, but it just has no, it doesn't have a lot of character to it. So I just said not much variation in the color, like I can see with my, the green from Scribo. So let me show you how I was using that ink and pen, and you could see here, I love the variation in my width of my writing, and but I didn't see a lot of variation in the color as I would like. And I think it's because it was just really dark. So the next one is my Scribo feel. And this one is just It's so comfortable. I'm just gonna put it right here as a 10. Now flow, I've noticed I gotta give it a 9 because when it's writing, it's great. But there's been some hard starts. And that's only when I am like pausing. It's such a comfortable fountain pen. Even these facets on here don't get in the way. And even though it's a bigger pen, I feel like I can hold it further back and from the paper, and it's comfortable. I can write with this pen for a long time. So for ink flow, this ink, you could tell like there's not much pressure I need to make on this nib, even though it's quite bouncy, to get the light and dark. So the ink flow is actually really great. I'm giving it a 10, and it's juicy when it comes out. You could see that how the light catches something that is really wet on the paper. It looks shiny, and it's just such a enjoyable pen to write with when you have a really lubricated nib. All right, so let's look at some examples of how it looked like in my journal. So this is how it was. It almost made it just a tad bit difficult to write in print. I had to slow down when I'm writing in print, and it's so much easier to write in cursive because it just like flows so easily off the page. But when I'm writing in print, I really have to concentrate on my handwriting if I want to be able to read it or keep it consistent, because the nib is so bouncy. But for some reason, I don't mind it on this pen. Other pens, it may cause a problem, but with this pen, it doesn't. And this was using Herbin de Gris, Vert de Gris, which is gray blue. Next one is my Leonardo Zero Paraiso. And I was using Pilot Iroshizuku Ku-Jaku with this beautiful pen. I'm going to tell you now that the flow of this pen is a 6.5. When I was trying to write quickly with this fountain pen, it did not keep up. And it felt so dry and scratchy. But this is also an extra fine. So I have to think a little bit differently when I'm writing with this pen, that it's not really a speed writer, or I can't treat it like a speed writer like I can with my Scribo. So for comfort, Leonardo's are so comfortable. It has a little bit more weight to it, so I'm gonna give it a 9, just because I could feel that weight even now in comparison to like my Scribo and some of the other pens, that I can only write with it for so long before I know that my hand is gonna either cramp up or just get too tired. So I just wrote a little more weight than needed for long writing sessions. So you could probably hear how it's writing on the paper. As for ink, this ink is actually really pretty, even coming out of this extra fine. So I'm going to give it an 8.5 because I can see the potential, but because it's coming out of such a small nib, small nib and extra fine, it just, you can't see the beauty of the color. So let me show you what that looks like in my journal. This is the one I was using the most, using more recently this past week. So you can see here, it's really pretty, especially when I'm writing in print. And I can see in some cases how it pulls and it gets darker. And then that was really nice, but in cursive, it looks kind of boring of a color. And plus, it wasn't very lubricating for the extra fine pen. Okay, so next is my Platinum 3776 in the Chenonceau, and I have my my permanent ink, which is the DeAtramentis brown. So this is just a good overall pen. The flow is pretty decent for this fine nib, which almost is like an extra fine. And the ink, the comfort, it's comfortable. I mean, I love Platinums. They're very comfortable with it being capped and without. And then for ink flow, it's actually really good. It's not super juicy, but it's just the right amount. And I'm going to give it a 9. So for flow, it works great. For the fine nib. For the comfort, it's a Platinum. Hello. And then for ink flow, or for the ink, the color is a little dull. Color is dull. It kind of reminds me of the color on top, and how it's just really flat. But it works so well on every type of paper. And it's permanent. And it works well in this pen. There was a time when I did not write with this pen for about a week, but it starts right up, so it works well, better than the ink up top. So it works well being a permanent pen. And I was using this mainly, I've been using this mainly in my personal planner. So I don't have as much of a writing sample, but I can show you the last thing. I started journaling with it for the rest of this week, which I still need to finish. But yeah, it works really well. I can keep this inked up for a while. And plus the mechanism in here to keep this ink, or keep this pen inked up and not dry out, does also help. We have the Kaweco Student. Oh boy, this pen, it was not my jam. So it's an extra fine. The flow was pretty terrible. I'm giving it a 5. It was inconsistent. Although right now it wants to look like it's very consistent. And I just felt like it just wasn't working right. Like, it took too much effort. I would have to, for some reason, this one's starting right up. I don't know why. But it was inconsistent for me. In fact, I didn't even use it in my journal, mainly because the ink flow was terrible, and the ink itself is not my jam. I'm giving it a 5 as well. So you can see there's hard starts. and it's inconsistent. Sometimes it's thick and sometimes it's not. So it bothers me. And then for comfort, this pen is actually rather comfortable. I do like the fact that it's like concave in on the grip section, even though it's metal, but it's quite comfortable. So I'm giving it a 9. It's just a little bit too lightweight for me. It's like a little bit unbalanced because of the metal section in the front, that it's like, I feel like there's more weight towards the front of the pen, and it's something I'm not really used to. My color. And I wonder if it's because of the extra fine. It might look better in a wider nib. But again, not my color. This is definitely going to be rinsed out and probably put away for now. And I might not come back to it for a while. And then now to my new acquisitions. So I have my Pilot Izumo, and this thing is gorgeous. This one, the flow, it was actually, I would have kept it at 10, but I'm going to actually keep it at a 9 because it didn't keep up with my pen. And it could have been because there was a point where the cap was a little bit loose, so it's kind of hard to tell, but I'm just going to give it a 9 and not a 10 because there was some time where I actually had to adjust the ink. So there's that hard start. For comfortability, that's absolutely a 10. This pen, even though it's heavy and it's not heavy, it's long, it's big, it's girthier, but comfortable. I usually hold my pen differently from when I write in cursive versus writing in print. Sometimes I write like this in print and then I hold like this in cursive. Sometimes I hold like this in cursive and write in print, but this is very comfortable to use any way I hold. So for ink flow, or for ink itself, I love this color. It's it is not black, it's a purple black. So it's dark enough to think it's black, but then it kind of tricks you a little bit because as you're writing, you can see like, oh, wait, there's like a hint of color to the page. So let me show you what that looks like in my journal. So here, it looks black, but then you're like, oh no, it's not very, very black. So yeah, I think it's a great color if you look for something really dark, but not super black. And then last but not least was a new acquisition. This one too was also kind of uncapped a little bit. I don't know what it is with these. So this is the Gioia pen, and I accidentally put in the wrong ink for this pen. Which one did I use? I ended up using Lenon, Toolbar, Yong, Quan. You can see how light this is. It's just not my jam. So for ink, I'm gonna give it a 7. It's been a while since I've written with this pen. The flow is actually, I don't know, it's kind of hit or miss. So I'm gonna give it, oh, there goes that. Kind of makes sense. Oh yeah, I forgot. This is actually a piston filler. Let's see if we can get it to write. So yeah, hard starts. But it's juicy. But too many hard starts. I mean, that's just knocking it down. And then comfort. This pen is actually quite comfortable, and the grip section is long enough to where it's quite thick. So I'm going to give it a 9. And then you have the threads at the bottom. So I think it's a pretty comfortable pen, not like the best comfortable pen, but it's up there. Not too heavy. So for ink, the ink is pretty, but too light. And therefore, it's hard to read. So, what are my top 3 fountain pens for this month? Can you guys guess? My Pilot Izumo, my Leonardo. It's got to be my Scribo. So these 3 pens just had everything going for them this month, and I will most likely keep them inked until I use all the ink out of them, and then decide if I want to actually like use them again for February or not. As for the rest, they are going to be cleaned and put away so that I can find a new set of pens. I'm really going to start just at 6 pens, and if I do decide to add these back into the mix, I might just do that. So let me know your thoughts, suggestions. How do you feel about my scoring system? What can I do better? What would you like to see? And yeah, so I hope you guys found this helpful, interesting. Let me know what you think in the description or in the comments, and I will make sure to put the names of the pens and the inks I used in the description in case anyone was unsure about how I was pronouncing it and what the names are and everything like that. I hope you guys have a good rest of your day. I will talk to you in the next video. Bye.